Anybody on slicks or not?
Yeah, but we want to be ahead of these guys if we get the box.
Look at this, across the line, it's side by side, who gets it?
Yeah, good recovery. Good decision.
Nothing spices up F1 strategy like a splash of rain. So I'm here with Bernie Collins, our former strategist, to pour through all the data from Sprint Saturday and look through a couple of strategies we were quite impressed by. Nico Hulkenberg and George Russell both ending in the points.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting, sprint with the extra pit stops that we don't normally get in there, and definitely some strong performances, some big decisions that were made, but did they get them all right? I think there was a little bit more in that there, particularly for Hulkenberg.
Interesting, already finishing in 6th place. It's quite a dynamic race. We've got a strategist, we've got a driver. Time to move to the touchscreen and have a closer look. So normally for a sprint, 24 laps, strategists probably think it's going to be an easy time. No need for a pit stop, bolt on a set of tyres and sit back and watch the race.
Yeah, it's not quite as easy as sit back and watch the race, but yes, often it is that way. However, as we know with the wet start this one, it was always a chance the track condition was going to dry to get on a fully dry set of tyres towards the end.
So the drivers, when you're strapped in then in a wet race, they're starting on inters, you're thinking, can I put on slicks at some point? In fact, Valtteri Bottas started on slicks. He was so desperate to try and play the gamble. Of course, you need to get a top 8 in the sprint to get any points as well.
Yeah, so the difficulty that we had here, and this is what made the sprint, I think, really interesting, is we have over a 20-second pit loss and a very limited number of laps to make that back up. And that's where the decision towards the end of the race to get to dry, even though we knew it was quicker, was really difficult. Now, what we have at the end of the race here, so this is our race trace that we showed it many times before, but basically each of these lines represents a driver. As they do this sort of vertical line downwards, that represents a pit stop. So this grey trace is Hulkenberg's trace, and this is him completing a pit stop, and then out again on what we can see here is the medium tyre. So you can see that a lot of drivers box in this area. Russell in this sort of turquoise line, the first to do it, the first driver to stop and fit a dry set to run to the end.
So he's the chief instigator then, coming from out of the top 10, stuck in traffic a little bit there before as well. He's thinking, I've got nothing to lose. Let's take a pit stop. And that means that with the tyre stints then, we end up looking like a few colours on the board. Exactly,
yeah. So just to explain this graph, this is each driver along the bottom here, and this is the stints they did. Now, full green, obviously, if we just look at Gasly or at your side, the drivers that ended up leading the race, Verstappen, Perez, full stints on intermediate, never stopped to fit a new set. But what's important in this one is we can see the drivers that we're about to discuss. Russell does 9 laps on the soft tyre. That's the longest of anyone. And then we have the Leclerc and Albon, only 6 laps on a medium. So a bit of a difference. 3 laps doesn't sound like a lot, but what we're going to see in this race is those 3 laps really crucial to the outcome of the race.
So it's a really tough call. Everyone's keen to get the slicks on, but you need to get them on early enough to make use of a much faster car at that point. So it's a lot of dialogue, I imagine, between team and driver.
Yeah, and it's really vital in this rate, that communication. So we do have some video clips from a lot of these drivers here that are going to fill in the blanks for us at this point. So if we start with the Russell video. So this is Russell pre any of these decisions to stop for a dry set of tyres.
What would your thoughts be on slicks at a safety car restart?
Well, the problem is there's so much spray at the moment. I don't know if the line is dry, if it's raining, or if it's just spray.
Currently, it's a 0 on the ISSR.
What was that?
0 on the rain scale.
So it's interesting there, George Russell, not sure if it's even raining or not, for the second time in a few races, the sweat in Barcelona, this time the spray. And it's very tricky when you're in the spray because the water being washed off the tyres from the cars ahead. And you don't know as a driver if it's actually raining coming from the sky or not. And he didn't know what ISSR was, did he?
Yeah, so I think ISSR is just a scale, obviously, that Mercedes have come up with to discuss between them and the drivers without using long words. Just it'll be a number between 1 and 5 or 1 and 10 to discuss the rain level. But yeah, it is interesting. It's very honest feedback from George, isn't it, that he doesn't know what's going on.
They've simplified it pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not raining.
So we'll just watch the similar time of the race from Hulkenberg.
Sector 3, how far away is it from dry? Because Sector 1 is close on times.
Yeah, I think it's not, maybe two laps, but it's not far away.
Copy that, Nico. We're still in a very good position, so let's keep this tyre alive until that point.
So at this point, obviously, like Hulkenberg's running in front of the 2 Astons, so it was a very strong position for them to be running in, obviously.
I'm surprised that Nico in a Haas. This is like Christmas come early for Haas, fighting with the Red Bulls at the start. I'm surprised. It just shows how everyone is thinking about putting some slicks on. But the team very wary about Sector 3, saying Sector 1's okay, Sector 3 not so much. What are they looking at then to see that?
The teams will go into the race and they'll know roughly what they think a sector time should be for each of the 3 sectors. And they'll have a percentage point, which we call the crossover point. And when a lap time is slower than that, you should be on an inter, or we believe an inter should be quicker. And when it's quicker than that, you should be considering moving to the dry. So at this point on their graphs and in their data, they're saying, you know, one of the sectors looks okay to us, the other one's getting close, but we'd really like some driver feedback. And it also sort of gets Nico Hulkenberg thinking of exactly the right point in the track. Could he survive that on a dry? That's really what they're asking him.
So it's not just a crossover lap time everyone's looking for from inters to slicks, but they're actually breaking it down sector by sector. And for Nico Hulkenberg, in a good position here, wary of Sector 3 being too risky on the slicks. And they're being a bit cautious at this stage.
I think, yeah, they are. But as well as that, it's good feedback. He's given them a very clear 2 laps to go. That is really set in their mind and aligned with his on how long they think it's going to be till it reaches that point. So it's good communication between both at this stage of the race, I think. And
they've got to be bang on it because soon there's about to be someone taking that gamble.
Exactly, yeah. So the conversation continues across both. Hulkenberg actually, again here, still pushing for the dry tyres.
Slicks soon.
Copy that.
Anybody on slicks or not?
No one yet, and it's 9 laps to go at the line. So far, no one's moved.
And then, if we move to the other car, we move to Russell. Similar point in the race.
What position are we? And is that Albon a P8?
P11 currently and Albon P7.
It's dry and quick, I don't think it's far off slicks.
Copy that, we're monitoring the times.
Yeah, but we want to be ahead of these guys if we're going to box. If this was quality now, I'd probably be boxing for slicks.
Box, box, box.
So in goes Russell then. Interesting dialogue. Haas very wary, 9 laps to go. And of course, with every lap that no one pits, no one gains by going on the slicks, and they've got this track position. Russell, outside of the top 10, wants to know where he is, where things stand, and if they're going to go for it, again, they need to go early enough, because if you pit for slicks a few laps later, you've just got less time to make up 20 seconds of a pit stop.
Exactly, and like you say, Russell's been stuck P7 Albon, you know, the 4 cars ahead in P11. He's been stuck in that train the whole race at this point, and he knows he needs to do something different to get ahead of them. So it is good comms. It's amazing how late they actually tell him that they want to box, the final decision's made, and good clear feedback from Russell again to say, if it was qualifying, that really sets it in the engineer's head. You sort of really know what's going on then. So the interesting fallout from this for me, from an engineering point of view, and what sets the remainder of what happens in the race, is what happens in the data whenever Russell comes out. That's the really interesting bit. So if we just go to the GPS trace, this is available to all of the teams. And the first thing that you'll see is Russell come out of the pits, and it's a little bit of time before we get a full lap time from him. So what we will be able to do through the GPS is compare his out lap straight away. So we'll start by looking at his full lap on intermediate, and we'll add in his out lap on the dry. So this GPS trace, we can see that the blue is Russell on his intermediate, the lap before he stops, and the red is his out lap on the soft tyre. So before we've even got a lap time, we can start to see what's going on here. Now, the interesting bit is that in these corners, so in these braking zones, after he slowed the car down, they're very close between an intermediate and a soft tyre, and that's very important to me. It says that the soft's not that far off the intermediate.
And everyone, of course, looking at what George is doing. And for George, it's quite a hectic time, leaving the pits, damp track, and you're taking that gamble on the slicks. He's a guy that loves a gamble. We've seen it so many times before, but you do just have to feel it out from the cockpit. So you're worried about having an aquaplane, basically, where the tyres are going to slide on the surface. I think maybe that is why he's braking a bit early on the outlap. He's a bit cautious there. But the mid-corner speeds, as you point out, that's where he's just got the car loaded up laterally, and the grip is there. So you can start to gain confidence and gain lap time.
Yeah, and then you can see, you know, a bit like the Sector 3 discussion that we had with Hulkenberg, these last few corners maybe being a little bit more cautious on that soft tyre, because that is the sector that we think is a little bit wetter at this stage. But the engineers on the pit will be looking at this, and they should be seeing You know, that soft tyre for Russell, even though the full lap time's not there yet, because obviously he's come out of the pit lane, it's not too far off. So they can start to use that information to go forward. So if we go back to the race trace then, you can see that's what led some of these other cars to stop in the laps immediately afterwards and make some of those decisions. And then if we go back to the Hulkenberg video, we can see a little bit more what was going on from the Hulkenberg team side of that.
I think slicks are gonna be okay. It's the question of can you make up that time, that pit loss?
Yep, copy that. No one else has gone yet. Russell gambled because he was in the back. You're currently P4. What do you think, Nico, about tyres? Piastri just went. No top 10 yet.
I think it's okay for slicks.
Mode T4, yeah, mode T4. It's a new medium. It's a new medium. Box now, Nico. Box now.
I like the little wiggle he has just as they're discussing that they should go for a softer tyre.
Yeah, exactly. Confidence is sparring at its best, isn't it? It's very interesting that they're concerned about who's in the top 10. None of the big players have pitted, only a couple of chances from the back. The problem is for Haas here, and it's always a problem for Haas this year, they're dropping back anyway. Their degradation's quite high. So from earlier on, Nico was in a good position. He's still doing okay, but he knows that he's looking backwards. And I guess fitting a dry tyre at this stage, you drop back, but then you can just charge forwards.
Yeah, it is a risk. 20-second pit loss. We're talking 6-7 laps to go now at this point in the race. You need to make up really big time in order to get there in the race. And that's the bit that's really difficult for Hulkenberg and the Haas team. And it's interesting, at this stage, Hulkenberg is the one very much pushing for that dry tyre. And the team probably finds a little bit, the pit wall side, a bit more reluctant. So if we just go back to the data, we can see a little bit what happened from this point going forward. So again, we're back on this race trace. This is the Hulkenberg stop lap. He's just starting to lose position to the Aston Martin. So he's maybe considering he doesn't want to lose a lot more positions. Let's say might be one of the reasons Hulkenberg's starting to push to stop. But he stops here and then he's very quickly able to make up the time again. So I guess the question for us to look at, Jolyon, is this the maximum he could have achieved? So is this P6 where Hulkenberg finishes? Is that all that was on the board?
Yeah, it's interesting as well because Russell's done the pit stop 2 laps earlier. Then we heard Piastri stop the next lap. So many other drivers stopped on the Hulkenberg lap and even the next lap. And that means that for Russell and maybe for Hulkenberg, they've got fewer cars to overtake at that time as well. So it's actually really helping them that more people are going towards slicks.
Yeah, exactly. So just like you say here, when Russell comes out, a lot of the people have boxed out of his way. We see all these lines. And his run then to the end of the race is actually reasonably clear from traffic, much like Hulkenberg's is as well, to be fair. So again, if we just switch back to the other slide then. So this is an example of what could have happened to Hulkenberg if we'd made some different decisions. So the solid line here is what Hulkenberg actually done, this solid grey line. We can see his pit stop, we can see his run to the end. He actually finishes the race really, really close to both Aston Martins. He's 1.5 seconds behind Stroll, who's the lead Aston Martin. And at this phase of the race, you can see this line is going much, much quicker than the 2 Aston Martins in the green. He's around 5 seconds a lap faster at this point. So that's just how crucial those decisions were. Which is why if we look at this dashed line, the grey line that stops earlier, any lap, 1 or 2 laps earlier, like Russell's did, means he potentially had the opportunity to overtake the Astons at the end, given how close he came. The other alternative is, what if he didn't stop? Obviously the pit wall were hesitant. If he'd remained on track, would have likely lost the position to the Aston Martin. He'd already lost the position to Lance Stroll. But could he have stayed ahead of Ocon here at the end? It's a bit neutral in finishing position, that one. But definitely, the winning strategy is to stop at least 1 lap earlier and have that extra 5 seconds a lap advantage over the Astons.
So pitting for Hulkenberg was a must, actually, really, with the degradation of the Haas as well. But pitting earlier, same lap as Russell, which they were talking about for so long, that would have been the money shot. I have to say, it's way easier to do when you're not running in the top 10. When you're a Haas in the top 5, thinking you're going to get your big points day, I can understand their caution there. and they still got a good result out of it.
Exactly, and strategy is always easy afterwards. You know, I've lived my life trying to defend that.
Yeah. Were any others going to be ruining that, thinking strategy's easy after?
I think there's a lot going to be looking back at it and that would potentially change their decision. I guess really the standout is for me is Albon here in this sort of light blue line. He was at the front of that train that we heard Russell discuss and running in P7 at that point. Again, a very strong running position for Williams this year. The second last point scoring position in this race. Could he have continued and stayed ahead of Ocon and remained in that sort of P7 position? That is a big question for me. They boxed one of the last people to box onto the dry tyres. And because of that, they got undercut, by the Russell, who was 2 behind, by Hamilton as well. And because of their pace then, they lost to the Ferrari. So they ended up losing quite a few positions relative to where Ocon finished, which I think they will be regretting in hindsight.
Look at this, across the line, it's side by side, who gets it? That was super close. Ocon hangs on for 7th position.
All right, well, thanks, Bernie. Really good stuff. British Grand Prix is coming up this week, scene of many a great race and many a great strategy. Stay tuned.